Here we go then. A late decision to get the stream going, but we're rolling. Deadline's in 7-ish hours. This will not be a deadline stream. I will not be streaming for 7 hours. But we will, maybe the next hour-ish, roughly, be discussing my thoughts ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix. So welcome. I know it's literally just been dropped on you as to who is actually in here. Oh, there we go. Cool. Sorry, I just checking the stream. It currently says 0 views. I was like, people here, but then there's people in the chat, so I assume there's actually people here. So hi. So as I was saying, going to go through, like I say, roughly next hour is kind of my target. What I'm thinking ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix, and I was thinking going into, when I woke up this morning, I looked at FP1 and I was just like, what the hell? Why is Stroll P1? I don't know what's going on. They look like a complete mess. I'm glad I didn't bother kind of waking up for that. But then I managed to watch the sprint qualifying, and that was even more of a mess because of the rain, obviously, which just really jumbled things about and made things very difficult to actually know what the hell's going on. So thanks for joining me. Very kind of last minute kind of thing. I'm still a bit confused by the stream thing's not actually giving me any numbers on actually how many people are in here. I'm only going off the fact I'm live because people are talking in the chat. I don't know why it's not telling me why there's no actual people in here, but people are talking to me, so let's go with it. Thank you for joining me last minute. Like I say, it was just like I've got lots of stuff in my mind. It's like, am I going, I've got my current team on screen at the moment. I'm thinking I could just stick with this. I'm thinking I could switch to the Verstappen build with the budget fodder and in the likes of, the double Sauber, double Williams. There we go. Now the numbers have finally got up there. 38 viewers. There we go. Thank you, YouTube. Finally got there. And then obviously the Limitless is still a possibility, although I'm personally just a little bit put off by using Limitless now. I was not set on using it, but quite high on using it. And now because of the lack of real information about who the strongest is and the fact that McLaren look much stronger than we expected, than they expected, I think as well, it makes me think Limitless, although I'm sure it will still do well, it's not entirely clear who the best options are to put in your team. Like the McLarens do actually look pretty strong, and you want to be a bit more sure about it in terms of Limitless. And I was thinking, if I don't use Limitless now, obviously you've still got the option in other sprint races, for example Miami, or I was thinking actually potentially, I know it's way off, but in Qatar, because of how good the McLarens were last year, potentially even holding off way down the season for the Qatar Grand Prix, which I believe is a sprint race as well. But anyway, I'm already kind of diving straight into way down the line, but we've got more pressing matters at hand in China. So I'm just going to see what's going on in the chat and say hello to some people. Racing's Epic, hello. Ishmael, what's good? What's up? I go with, Adam, what would a Limitless team look like? It would, well, exactly, that's the problem. I've just sort of touched on Limitless already, and what would it look like? Initially going into this weekend, I was thinking triple Red Bull, triple Ferrari, and then probably either Norris or maybe an Alonso. Having seen Norris on pole in the sprint, then I would pick Norris as that fifth driver. But then if I'm going Limitless, would I actually want more McLaren cover? Because actually they look very competitive against not just the Ferraris, but even potentially against the Red Bulls. I do think the Red Bulls will still be the strongest force, particularly when it dries up Saturday, Sunday. But that is one of the main reasons why I'm kind of pulling away a little bit from using Limitless, because it's just not clear and obvious who the best two teams are. Your Red Bull, yes, and it's probably going to be like that the rest of the season, largely, I'd imagine, unless Ferrari and McLaren or whoever can really just pull something out the hat and leapfrog the Red Bulls, then I just don't think it's entirely clear who the best option is as the number two kind of team. So, going triple Ferrari, triple Red Bull, although it looks great, what happens if the McLarens are just better than the Ferraris? I mean, I still think the Ferrari is going to edge it, but there's that doubt which has put me off using the Limitless. When I used the Limitless last year, I used it in Monza, which wasn't even a sprint race, but I used it because it's I know, or at least I think I know who the best 5 drivers are, and it's we're going in with triple Ferrari, triple Red Bull, Lewis Hamilton, and it paid off perfectly. I'm not saying it's going to, we're going to find the perfect scenario again this season, but I'm getting that kind of feeling like doesn't feel quite right. Don't know who the best, don't know who's better at McLaren and Ferrari or whatnot. So yeah, in terms of Limitless, because I expect I'll get quite a few questions regarding Limitless. My current feelings are, for me personally, I'm just a little bit off it, So let's go back to the chat and see what's going on. No negative. I straight away go to the chat and I see no negative questions. I've already used my no negative because, again, it kind of felt right to me back in Australia. Saved me 20 points. Okay, job done, fair enough. But I know probably not the optimal use of it, but still, it's really hard to predict or to use the no negative optimally, because it's a weird chip, because when you use it, you kind of want your drivers to DNF, which is weird. It's weird. You don't. I don't know. It's strange. But I guess if your drivers DNF, you also still lose that value. But obviously, you don't lose the points. So in terms of gaining points, it's worthwhile. But if I still had the no negative left, if you've got the no negative, again, it's kind of team dependent, I guess. I would be tempted to use it though. I mean, I don't think there's going to be much more rain looking at the current forecast at the moment. So if there was more rain, then I'd certainly be almost certainly using it, to be honest. But I think the lack of rain makes me slightly less likely to do it. But I would still say, if I had a no negative, I would still be very tempted to use it, particularly if I was going to go with like the Verstappen build. So if I get it up on screen, we all know what I'm talking about. I'll get it up on screen anyway. So we've got the Bottas and the Logan Sargent build in there. So this is the kind of alternative option I'm looking at, other than the Perez build. I'm going to look at this and going with a team like this, use no negative whilst you're kind of stuck with the likes of Sargent and the Saubers. Gearbox problem for Zhou in Japan. Not great pit stops. Albon and Sargent just not great starts of the season. We know Williams have got problems. We know Sargent's just got a DNF just waiting for him. So yeah, if I was going to go with a team like this and I had no negative, I'd be very tempted to use it, because then you can just really still maximise Verstappen and Red Bull's points and the Ferrari constructor points without that kind of worry of having like Sargent in your team. Of course, if you go with a team like this, you're not really going to grow your budget very much unless you get lucky. So you're kind of stuck with a team like this is the main problem, and why I'm just kind of holding off going for it. But at the same time, as you can see, I'm only 0.4 away from not being able to afford this team, and I think having Verstappen sat here to 2 times is just too good to give up, really. Imagine we had this opportunity at the beginning of the season with Ferrari sat there. This is like the same team I had at the beginning of the season, except I've got Ferrari instead of the Aston Martins, and then obviously instead of Stroll, I've got like a Bottas or whatever. But yeah, basically the long story short is, if I had no negative, I would definitely be considering using it right now. Let's go back to the chat because it's gone a bit busy. Yeah, I mean, that Forsyth makes a good point regarding the Limitless again. That the Red Bulls, in fact, I've got it on the screen here, haven't I? I've put it on the right hand side as to the positions of the sprint qualifying. With Verstappen in P4, Perez in P6, Leclerc P7, Sainz P5, there's potential for positions gained in overtake, so Limitless could gain you a few extra points. Is that going to be worth it though? Like, let's say all those drivers overtake like 2 or 3 people, then all of them are going to get, a grand total of 7, 8, 9 points or something like that, maybe. Or I guess if you're doing positions gained and overtakes, then it's like 2 for each. So then it's like 2 times. Yeah, it's still only like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 points or something. I'm not sure if it's really worth it that much for that reason. Although in the dry, like I said, even in the dry, like in the rain started kind of towards the middle or towards the end of the second part of qualifying this morning, and before that, there was still the McLarens were still kind of in the mix amongst the Ferraris. So even in the dry, the McLaren seemed actually quite good. But I imagine come race day, the Ferraris and Red Bulls are still going to be kind of out the front, and I think they'll still be the optimal kind of team. But the McLaren strength that they've kind of shown so far have just made me a little bit reluctant. And if I was going to go Limitless, which is such an important chip in the season, it's a very, very powerful chip, I want a bit more certainty. I mean, I would say if you're going to go Limitless, and I think there are quite a few people that will go Limitless this weekend, I don't think it's wrong, but I do think there's some risk involved. And for such a powerful chip, I personally think I want to save it for further down the line, like I said, maybe Qatar later on in the season, I could, triple up on Red Bull and McLaren down there if the McLarens are as strong or even stronger as they were last season. There are other options, and right now I'm just a little bit hesitant, a little bit like not 100% sure that the Ferraris are the best to triple up on, with the McLarens kind of poking their noses around. So that's kind of where I'm at with my chip usage. McLaren being 3 million more than Ferrari is whack, says Jason. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's another reason, I guess, for holding off on the Limitless when the McLarens are the second best team. For example, I know I'm kind of focusing a lot on Qatar, but that's just what's in my mind at the moment because it's far away. But that's just kind of what sprung to mind as to when I might use it down the line if I don't use it now or Miami. If McLaren are still ahead in terms of finance, I mean, the prices might change a lot by then. McLaren 24 million, yeah, it's about almost 3 million. Maybe the prices will that price gap will close towards the end of the season where Qatar is. Nevertheless, McLaren, and Norris as well. That's the thing. Norris is also quite expensive, 23.8 compared to the other Ferraris who are like 20 million or whatever. Again, I think those prices will condense towards the end of the season, so it won't be such a big difference. But at the moment, the McLarens are dearer, so saving the Limitless for when McLarens are the optimal team, piling them in when other people won't be able to, will certainly get a lot of points further down the season. Second to last race, Limitless, crazy idea. Is it? McLaren. Got some deleted stuff. Perez and Stroll. Perez with Stroll, or take my. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Anxious astronaut. Perez and Stroll. If I flick back to my actual team, Perez and Stroll is literally who's in my current team at the moment, and it's what I've been toying with for literally the last 2 weeks, ever since Japan kind of finished. And even before Japan, I had this kind of similar team, and I was wondering if I should have run the Verstappen build. And ultimately, if I'd gone with the Verstappen build in Japan, it would have paid off way better than what I'm currently sat with. But do I do the same thing again? Do I try and build budget more with Perez and Stroll, or just cut my losses and go with the Verstappen build and just accept I have double Sauber, double Williams, and it would be a -10 as well? I don't think I would wildcard for a -10. I think I'd probably rather save it for, we've got a host of upgrades coming, particularly in Imola. So I'm thinking if it all changes around and suddenly I need to make like 4 substitution or four even like 5 transfers, something drastic, then I think I would probably rather have the wildcard for that. So I think I can probably just about get by scraping off a -10 to get in Max Verstappen. But it just really concerns me having the double Sauber, double Williams. It's like. But at the same time, there's no real guarantee that this build on screen at the moment is actually going to gain me the budget, because it didn't gain me the budget in Japan, albeit very unluckily, Perez being just that fraction of a point off from going up a million. So it would have been, an extra 0.7. Stroll, just an extra couple of points, would have gained a million as well. And it's just like, but then am I going to be in the same situation going on the other side of China, going into Miami, thinking like, I was a bit unlucky again. Perez had a good weekend in China, but he only went up 0.3. Verstappen still goes up his kind of obvious 0.2 that's going to happen. Stroll, I don't know, he's good DNF. He's right in the meat grinder on the sprint race. Was he P14? I think was he P14? Yeah, more or less, somewhere around there. That's what I determine the meat grinder of the beginning of the race, because it's literally just like everyone's like piling into that little small area. It's just a mess. People crash out. We saw it in Japan with Albon and Ricciardo just a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know. I'm just thinking like worst case scenario, I guess, that this team not only doesn't get me budget but also doesn't get me points, and then I can't get the Verstappen build, and I also don't have the points, and it's just like maybe I should just take my -10 and go with the Verstappen build. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Like I say, to summarize where I'm at the moment, is kind of I've pulled a little bit away from the Limitless, and I'm kind of more deciding between team on screen, and to be honest, because I've only got 0.2 in the bank with this team, I can't really even make like a one transfer. I could go like a Zhou to a Bottas or something just to try and scrape a bit more money. But I do think Zhou has got like a very outside chance maybe of driver of the day, because it's his home race, and maybe the home support will get voting for him if he has a reasonable race. I don't know. I mean, we saw it in Japan with Tsunoda, got quite a few votes, didn't quite get there. But there's potential for that, and I don't know. So basically where I'm deciding is kind of between this team or just taking the -10 and going Verstappen, double Sauber, double Williams, and just like praying that it's not the likes of Sargent's weekend to finally DNF. Let's go back to the chat and see what's going on. Verstappen 3 times chip. I wouldn't. Personally, wouldn't. It's just a little bit too unknown. I guess it's the same for like the Limitless. It's just a little bit too unknown. I don't think it's bad, but at the same time, I think the 3 times chip is probably better later on in the season when we've got a more reliable second driver. If I use a 3x chip now on Verstappen, I can't then also have Red Bull and Ferrari in my team. I'd have to drop them to like an Aston Martin or an RB or a Haas or whatever, and able to get a second driver like a Perez or a Sainz in here, and that's just not appealing to me. It kind of defeats the purpose of doing the 3 times. I'd rather hopefully down the line be able to afford a better second driver potentially, but then that also kind of makes me think like, oh, maybe you should try and budget build then after all. If you don't budget build, then you're not going to be able to afford a better second driver down the season. But anyway, it's just swings and roundabouts, and it's hard. F1 fantasy is hard. Let's have a look at the chat again. Which fifth Limitless driver would you recommend and why? I've already spoken about Limitless, but if you missed the beginning of the stream, like I say, I'm not entirely sure. If you're going triple Ferrari and triple Red Bull, then I think Norris is quite an obvious candidate. I would have said potentially Norris before everything happened today, but Norris being on pole for the sprint, if he can like eke out a win there, like wow, it's an 8 pointer right there. Pretty nice. So that's a good start. I think although that said, Alonso, what is he, P3? Alonso P3 in the sprint, and he's good round here. He's won round this track before, Mr. Experience there. So yeah, it'd be very tight for me between Norris and Alonso, but I think I'd probably go Norris. Probably go Norris. Jason has 0.4 less money than me and has Leclerc instead of Perez. Okay, what are you doing, Jason? You can't afford the Verstappen build. Can't even put Perez without needing to drop Stroll. Oh dear, yeah. See that? This is the exact same thing. What Jason's talking about here is the situation. Sorry to drop you in this and make you feel bad, but that's the situation I don't want to be in myself coming out of China. Like suddenly I can't afford the Verstappen build. But at the same time, if I commit to the Verstappen build now, I'm basically like making my bed with the Saubers and the Williams, which also feels really rough. Like I'm on, you can see Bottas and Sargent both got 500,000 rises. I think they were very fortunate to get that last week. It helped massively that the likes of Albon and Zhou were unfortunate enough to DNF. Sargent went into the gravel, almost DNF'd, managed to pull it out and just about get his 500,000 rise. I just don't see this building much budget. I feel like if I go with this for the -10, I'm all in it for the points, like the short-term points and like longer-term. Am I really doing much? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I'm just stuck with this team. I feel like unless I get lucky and Sargent, Bottas or whatever, Zhou, Albon, any of these guys manage to luckily kind of get an extra 500,000 rise, that's the only way I'm going to be able to get onto the more optimal people in this region. Like the Hazes, I think the Hazes are really good guys to get in at the moment. They look really strong. They look like they keep rising in price, like pretty with consistency. They've got upgrades this weekend as well. And the other option in this sort of region would be like a Yuki Tsunoda, who's a little bit dearer. But those are the sort of people I want. And if I stayed with the Perez Stroll kind of build, again, if I kind of reset again, if I stayed with this build, then that's kind of what I'm aiming for, to use this to grow my budget for another week or so, and then hop on to the Verstappen build, but without the likes of Logan Sargent. Hopefully I can get like a Hulkenberg. Am I being a bit silly though? Am I really going to jump that much? How much is it? Like 1 million, or just over 1 million? And I could have afforded that last week. So am I now just trying to cover my tracks from for not going for the Verstappen build last week when I could have afforded Hulkenberg? I could have gone Hulkenberg, Zhou, Bottas, Sargent, I think, something like that. I can't remember the exact build, but so do I now like compound my mistake by trying to grow budget again and just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just chasing my tail, but I feel like if I try and grow budget and it doesn't work, then I'm screwed. But then if I just ignore the budget and go with the Verstappen build, I'm also a bit screwed because I'm just stuck with like literally the 4 worst drivers on the grid. And it's just like, it's a really tough decision, basically. And I think the community is kind of split as well. There's a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter like replying to a few things I've put out, and just like some people are like really set like build budget, and lots of other people like Verstappen build is just obvious, just go for it. And it's like, yeah, you're both right, but I can't do both. I want to build budget. I want to get the Verstappen build. Which one's actually correct? It's really hard to put my finger on it, to be honest. Let's see what else we got. No negative. Yeah, I have already touched on no negative already. If you want to scroll back about 10-15 minutes, I talked quite a bit about no negative. To summarize, I don't have the no negative, already used it. But if I was going to use if I still had the no negative, I would not definitely use it this weekend, but I'd be very tempted. In fact, I'd be more tempted to use it if I went with the Verstappen build and went, the double Sauber, double Williams. If I went with this build on screen at the moment, I'll probably be less likely to do it, just because I think hopefully the likes of Hulkenberg and Stroll are less likely to DNF than a Bottas dodgy gearbox or something, and then a Sargent crashing off randomly. Don't know. Michael's joined from the car park. Nice for you to join, Michael. Bit of a random last minute stream. I was thinking earlier this evening, I was like, do I want to stream? I kind of do. Yeah, I do. Let's do it. So I was just like, yeah, let's just do it. So welcome, Michael from the car park. Weather looks clear, good. The Max team is asking for trouble. You're brave going like, yeah. That's the thing. This is the thing. It's so split. Shall we? Let's get the poll going and see if you guys can help me out. So. Oh, that's not the right thing. Okay, I'm just filling out the poll. Something along those lines. I don't know if that's the best wording of the poll I've ever done, but there we go. Right, what else we got going on here? I'm afraid of using Limitless this week because of the weather. Yeah, I mean, Ben, I'm not personally afraid of the weather. I think the weather looks like it's mostly going to be clear, from what I understand. So I'm not too fussed about the weather. It's more about knowing who the second best team is, and whether that's Ferrari or McLaren isn't entirely clear to me. So I'm just a bit like, not sure. Jason's back in the chat again. You mentioned not wanting to be in my situation. Lol. Yep. Sorry. Would you Limitless if you were? I can't remember. Did you say what your exact team was? If your team is set up quite well in terms of trying to gain budget, then I would be much more tempted to it. But it's really hard for me to say exactly, because I don't know exactly what your team is. To be honest. Yeah, I'm not sure. What else we got in here? Like I said, here we go. So we got Red Bull, Ferrari, Leclerc, Stroll, Albon. Okay, so very similar to me. So Bottas instead of Zhou, and instead of Perez, you got Leclerc. So would you use Limitless, and would that be enough? That team seems reasonable for gaining budget. So yeah, because you're not in because you can't afford the Verstappen, then maybe it makes sense to just go Limitless and get the underlying budget gains to then get Verstappen in for Miami. Otherwise but then you could also just do that by not using Limitless and save it for a more optimal position down the line, like I've already mentioned several times, like Qatar, for example, later on in the season. Qatar's just one example, there's plenty of other opportunities really. But yeah, I think Leclerc, where's he starting, like P7, that's definitely some overtaking potential. Although I say there's overtaking potential, look who's in front of him. Perez, Sainz, Verstappen. That is not going to be easy for Leclerc to actually overtake in the sprint. Yeah, so I think if I was in your situation, I think I might still hold off the Limitless. It's still the same reason that I'm probably not going Limitless now. I would say I'd also not go with it for your team. I just kind of hope for the best, that you get enough budget out of that team. But like I said, I think a lot of people will go Limitless, and I hold my hands up to that, saying it's not a bad option, I don't think. Ash makes a good point. That you can always switch back, because I can afford the Verstappen build now. Just maximise Verstappen's points in the sprint races, and then switch back after Miami. Where are we after Miami actually? Where are we going? Oh, of course, Imola. Yeah, that's when all the upgrades and that, loads of upgrade packages are coming. Yeah, for sure. Could what's happened there? I've completely lost my lost my fancy team. How do I go back to the fancy? Literally lost it. Nope, don't want to do that. Alright, let's come back out of this for a second because I've completely messed this up. There we go. Right. There we go. And then we can full screen that. Sorted. Got there in the end. Right, let's have a look at the chat because things are picking up a bit here. Max, this is from Krish. What are your thoughts on Max, Fernando, Magnussen, Joe, Albon, Ferrari, and Aston? Not entirely sure what you're trying to do there. I mean, I guess you're trying to potentially build some budget, or are you using the 3 times with the 2 times on Fernando potentially? Thing is with Fernando, he's not great for building budget because he's fallen into that. He's in that C tier category now. I don't think he's likely to get the million. I think at best it'll be 0.1 or 0.3 most likely. So if you're trying to build budget, that's not great. Having Max in there is good, but then also not having the Red Bull constructor, kind of missing out on the strongest constructor that's been so strong so far this season. So that kind of worries me a little bit in a sprint race where they're going to really probably most likely maximize the points. So yeah, personally I'd say like going without Red Bull constructor is a bit of an awkward one. Racing is Epic says bye. Thanks, Tom. Well, thank you for joining. Ash, like and subscribe, guys. Yes, please do, because I realised the other day I'm actually almost at 4,000 subscribers, which is like a milestone of some description. So yeah, if you're not subscribed, please do. Try and get me up to 4K. Leclerc seems more likely to get driver of the day more than Sainz. I mean, I don't know. I mean, driver of the day seems pretty set on just any Ferrari driver. Although I do think like maybe Norris is going to get driver of the day if he has a good sprint, backs up with a decent Grand Prix. People like Lando Norris, and there's lots of McLaren fans out there that will vote for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if Norris gets it this weekend. But yeah, Albon to Hulk is a good transfer. I have Sainz but can't afford Verstappen build. I would say yes, probably. I think the Hazards have looked strong. Albon looks a little bit out of sorts. The Williams doesn't look great. Arguably in the sprint setup, Albon is in a better position in terms of positions gained potential. But I think the Hazards are actually in quite a good position. Where are they? Like around about the P12-ish area, P12, P13. I could see them maybe climbing a couple of places, and maybe if the Saubers drop back a little bit, then I could see a couple of points gained from the likes of Hulkenberg or Magnussen. I think overall, just like in a vacuum at the moment, I would pick Hulkenberg over Albon. Yeah. Where are we? Wouldn't the Ferrari drivers be a better option than Perez? Why are you saying that? Latest things coming there. I'm not sure why you'd think Ferrari drivers are a better option than Perez. I think Perez is a great option, to be honest. He's driving extremely well. He's got overtaken and positions gain potential in the sprint. And he's still going to have the same budget gaining potential as well as the Leclerc and Sainz because he's in the same category as them. So Perez is the best B tier candidate to get 1 million. Yeah, it probably is. I'd say I'd kind of agree with Ben there. I do think like Sainz and Leclerc are still very good options in that B tier, potentially get that million, particularly if they're able to get like a driver of the day, which they seem to keep on getting. But yeah, I do think Perez is just driving really well, and the Red Bull just looks like the best car. So in that B tier category, I just personally think that Perez is the best option, which is why he's currently in my team from Japan as well. Because I did have Leclerc originally. I switched him out to Perez, which gave me like 2 points in the end, I think. Whatever Leclerc got in Japan. Let's have a look at what's going on here with the poll. So most people lean toward budget building. Interesting. even though it's a even though it's a sprint race and we want to kind of maximize the max Verstappen points. Very interesting that 2/3 of you guys have decided budget building is the way forward, which is kind of one of the reasons why I was thinking about Limitless as well, because I could budget build whilst also maximising my points and not have to worry about it too much. But now I'm kind of off Limitless a little bit. I'm more like stuck between those two things again, like budget build or Verstappen. Blah, blah, blah. Tough one. Deadline, what is it now? That's 6 hours 40 minutes roughly. In fact, if I scroll up, I'll see it. Yeah, 6 hours 40 minutes. Yeah, thinking, because it's 4 a.m. the deadline for me, and I'm very unfortunately have work at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so it's going to be a bit rough if I decide to get up at 4 a.m. to go watch some F1 and set my team. So I'll probably set my team before I go to bed, to be honest. And by set my team, I mean either I'm basically going to leave it exactly as it is, or I'm going to take a -10 and put in Verstappen with the double Sauber, double Williams, and I haven't quite decided what I'm doing that, but that's kind of the purpose of this stream as well, to help me kind of process my thoughts, because and also obviously talk to you guys and get your opinions as well, hopefully try and help you out, although I don't know how helpful I'm being. But got Dizo in the chat who is fuming. I cannot work out my team. It's like, yeah, I guess that's where a lot of us are. I mean, some people are more decisive maybe. I think that's one of the things one of my weak points, I guess, as a fantasy manager is actually that final decision making. It's like I'm weighing up so many things. You're juggling so many thoughts and different aspects of your team selection decision making. It's actually like the final part of it, right before the deadline, like actually like weighing everything up perfectly and then picking the exact right thing. I struggle with it, and I think I'm slower at making my decision than a lot of you guys potentially. But that's just how I roll. Maybe that's just how my brain is wired, that I just like to weigh up decisions way more heavily than some people. I don't know. And that's not like saying like, oh, other people are just like slapdash and just make a decision or whatever. But it's like, I don't know. I just like to draw it out as long as possible before I finally settle in onto my decision. And I guess a part of that is also the fact that, going into the deadline and coming out the other end of the deadline, whatever happens post deadline that you cannot affect, I want to make sure that I'm like in a good mental place to like not have any regrets. So let's take it into account right now. So if I stay with this team, would I have regrets coming out of China? Regardless, once I set the team and the deadline goes at 4 a.m. for me in the morning, I can't change anything, past final fix, which I'm unlikely to use, to be honest. Would I be satisfied kind of regardless? It's like worst case scenario if I went with this team is like Stroll and Perez DNF basically. They lose me money. I don't get, I lose a sack full of points. I'm nowhere near the Verstappen build all of a sudden. That's, worst case scenario. Alternatively, I could switch to the Verstappen build. Worst case scenario obviously would be like Verstappen DNF and I've taken a -10 to bring him in. But more likely worst case scenario is like a Sauber DNFing because dodgy gearbox or pit stop taking 50 seconds. Although to be fair, in the sprint race shouldn't be getting any pit stops. But more likely, like I just feel like Sargent is just surely due a crash at some point. Like no disrespect to Sargent, he's done well to get to F1 in the first place, but he's proven last season multiple DNFs, multiple mistakes, and I feel like surely he's due soon. I don't know if that's the right way to think about things. Maybe we should just take things race by race and not think about who's due what. But basically, when I finally make my decision before I go to bed tonight, I want to be happy that decision is not going to leave me thinking like, why didn't I just do this? Why didn't I just do this? It's like, okay, well, regardless of the outcome, if Perez does DNF or whatever, or Stroll DNFs and I go with this team, I'll be like, okay, but going into the deadline, I had my reasons for picking this team, and stick with that. And if I get the DNF, then it's like, feels bad, but I'm not gonna sit there regretting my decision making. Who else we got in the chat here? Let's have a look. Oh, we got some familiar names suddenly popping in here. Adam's in the chat. I enjoy watching your mental process unpack. Take your time. Cool, thanks Adam. Great stream by the way earlier with Rob. I enjoyed watching that earlier. Fancy pit wall. I'm not locked in on anything yet. It helps me to write it down on paper going into next week. That's a good idea. I used to write down stuff a lot more actually, but now I'm more like just thinking. I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't have as much time now that I'm a dad. But I find going on dog walks is like where I find my most mental space in order to process my fantasy decisions. So a lot of my F1 fantasy team selection happens when I'm walking the dog, to be honest. It's like nice kind of peaceful atmosphere. That's where a lot of decision making is made, lots of thought processing going on. I don't think Limitless is as good this week as Ben. Yeah. I've talked quite a lot about Limitless, to be honest. I'm not going to talk about it too much more. The bottom line is I'm kind of off Limitless, to be completely honest. That's kind of where I'm at the moment. Well, 0.1 off the Verstappen build. Ooh, morale. I expect your morale has taken a hit by being just 0.1 off Verstappen build. Thinking of going Sainz, Stroll, Ferrari into Max, Aston, Ricardo with no negative. Okay, that seems quite reasonable. Limitless next week. I should get the value easily for Imola. Thoughts? Yeah, been providing there's no like random disasters. And by disasters, I mean like a Stroll DNF, which would hurt you quite bad, or like random stuff like your 2 times. If you're picking signs as your 2 times, and that's going to hurt. But I think that's quite a reasonable. If you're short of the Verstappen build, you've got nothing to lose. Because I can afford the Verstappen build, albeit at -10. I've got a very difficult decision to make. If I couldn't afford the Verstappen build at the moment, life would be quite easy for me. I think I would just stick with the current team on screen at the moment and just kind of not, be kind of chill about the whole thing. But because I can just about by 0.4 million afford the Verstappen build with the 2 Saubers, 2 Williams, it's giving me a real headache as to what I'm actually going to pick. Create a poll for using Limitless chip in China. Can do, Mr. Zimmerman. Just wait a second. Let's end this poll. And we'll add a new one. Oops. Yep, pretty straightforward. Let's stick the new poll in the chat. See what you guys think. Oh, 100% yes. Right, what else have we got now? If everyone's this is Fantasy Pitbull again. If everyone's going for a max build in Miami, leaves less points to gain on others using Limitless. If everyone's going for a max build in Miami, yeah, maybe to some extent. But then maybe we've got a better idea going into Miami of who the second best team is to fully maximize it. What's that? Someone's donated 59 knock. I don't know what that is, but thank you very much for 59 knock. I really don't know what that currency is, but thank you very much, Pete. Thoughts on Tsunoda in 19th? Perez, Tsunoda, Ricardo, and double has. I don't like Ricardo, to be honest. Ricardo's kind of off a little bit. Can afford Verstappen build with trash. Well, yeah, you seem to be kind of in the same position as me, really. I can afford the Verstappen build of trash, but then I could also get to a similar build. Perez. So I could get Tsunoda, and I think if I faff around a little bit enough, I could probably get Tsunoda in 19th. And he is in a good position. Oh, I'm actually 0.1 short of that, aren't I? I'm literally. Whoop. Yeah, I'm 0.1 short of being able to get Tsunoda in alongside like a Bottas. It's kind of annoying. That's really annoying. I just realised that I'm that far short. But thoughts on Tsunoda? I mean, general thoughts on Tsunoda in 19th. I think. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I think that he's had a really good start to the season, but listening to him in the interview, after the sprint quali, he didn't seem overly happy with the setup and everything. I mean, maybe I don't know. He's in a good position though, obviously, to get overtakes and get some positions gained. So I think he's in a fine position in that regard. But if he's already in your team, then I think it's absolutely leave him in there. But he doesn't fill me with confidence at the same time, just because of what happened in sprint quali. Maybe just got a bit unlucky. I don't know. I hope that answers your question. Where are we? I've got too many. There's too much chit chat going on now. There's too much. It was much easier to keep on top of the chat when there was 30 people in there. Not that I'm discouraging you from chatting. I want to see more people chatting. It's just hard to keep track of. I'm sorry. Right. What else we got in here? I can't read all this. Oh, Keith's joined in here. What the hell's going on? I thought the team would be locked. Nope, we've got sprint quali before making our decision, which makes things interesting. In fact, if we just thinking for a second, yeah, yeah. Basically, we've got sprint quali pre-deadline, which is like arguably really helpful, but because sprint quali was such a disastrous wet mess, then we haven't really learned very much from it, so it's actually not as helpful as I would have hoped. Can't get Perez and Hulk, sadly. I'll have to get Albon or Guan Yu if you stay with Sonoda. Norway doesn't have Euros. Oh, is it Norwegian? Okay. Oh, Norwegian krona. Thank you. I've been to Norway once before. Very nice place. Full of snow. That's my lasting memory of it. McLaren has upgrades in Miami. Yeah, I think it does, doesn't it? So maybe McLaren's going to be stronger around Miami, and maybe Limitless is good for there. I don't know. Are there any other sort of main talking points that people want me to discuss? Because I think, in summary of where I'm at personally, I'm still in that kind of the same position of, sticking with what I've got or going all in with Verstappen for the sprint race on a -10. If we have a quick look at F1 Fantasy Tools, it's actually quite interesting because I put my Team 1 in here and even with the -10, it still predicts the number one scoring team to be that Verstappen build with the double Sauber, double Williams. It's kind of interesting, it's taken into account the -10 and it's still coming up with 286 points. So if I didn't have to have a -10, it's basically predicting 296 points for that build compared to the actual build which I have, which actually isn't even on here. It's very similar to like this build 8 here, except I've got Guan Yu Zhou instead of Bottas down here, but that's predicting like 278. So it's it's interesting that the actual simulations are telling me I should go for the Verstappen build. But of course the simulations are only saying like what's good right now on this race. This is what you should do. I'm thinking more long term and like thinking like budget building potential as well. So it's not just all about what the simulation tells you to do. And to be fair, the fact that bear in mind that these simulations are kind of like best case scenario, like none of your drivers DNF, everyone scores the points they're expected to score, this is what you're going to get. And the fact that even like these teams without Verstappen in there are still scoring within sort of 10 or 20 points of the Verstappen builds, but with hopefully safer drivers, avoiding Sargent for example, makes me think like maybe it's just better to take a punt on the budget building. Hopefully gain a couple of million over the kind of 1-ish million with the Verstappen build, but yeah, I'm still kind of torn. Not quite there yet in terms of decision making. Let's see what else we got in the chat. Yeah, 0.8 difference in budget, says Leapfrog, and that's kind of what we're looking at. It's like, is it actually worth it trying to build budget and potentially failing to get 0.8 million effectively? That's what the simulations are telling us, and the likes of like a Has driver like a Magnussen or something potentially instead. But at the same time, I just don't know, because I do think that I don't know. It's such a fine balancing act. It's very, very difficult. Longer term budget building is great, but there's no real guarantee that budget building is correct. And in the meantime, I'm just bleeding Verstappen points if I don't go for him. I don't know. It also feels kind of wrong taking a -10 to effectively bring in Logan Sargent, but obviously we're doing it to bring in Verstappen, not to bring in Logan Sargent. That's just a necessary evil. What else we got? F1 Fantasy Pitbull's back again. Would you take a -10 to go to a max build if someone had a Leclerc build? What, so you're saying if your team looks like this, would you take a -10 to get to max? I think it's very much the same thing. I do think Perez is still a better option than Leclerc in general at the moment. But it would still boil down to, do I want to go with Max Verstappen with budget rubbish, or do I want to try and build budget? And I think Leclerc's got fairly good budget building potential as well as Perez, but I just think Perez is stronger. But ultimately, that wouldn't sway my decision. It would be purely based on, do I want to go with Verstappen or not? Sims seem quite high on Williams. Are they? Is that just because they are the cheapest people, basically, and that you can get in? Maybe because I don't know how they work out the Sims exactly, in comparing like Williams to Sauber. I don't know if they take into account like reliability or anything like that. I don't know exactly what goes into the algorithm. I have to ask Rita that, but Leclerc and Sainz, Red Bull Aston. I have Leclerc, Yuki, Magnussen, Nico. Free transfers, 105 budget. Leclerc, Yuki, Magnussen, Nico, Albon, Ferrari, and Red Bull. Well, that's pretty strong. Free transfers. Yeah, the fact that you don't have to take a -10 though is pretty nice. First cut. The fact you don't need to take a -10 to get the Verstappen build is quite nice. Yeah, and same for me. If I didn't have to take a -10 to get the Verstappen build, would I be more tempted to do it? I think I would. I think I would just be more inclined to do it. But then the fact that the -10 is factored into the simulation and it still says the Verstappen build is the best option, it's like kind of maybe just staring at me in the face. And am I, further down the season, when I look back at my season, am I going to focus on, Japan, China, and regretting not going the Verstappen build, and potentially being locked out of it for a few weeks at least? Don't know. Sean has joined in. Limitless in Miami as opposed to now. Yeah, like I've said extensively in this stream, like I'm kind of moved away a little bit from Limitless in China personally. So yes, I would definitely be looking more in Miami or further down the line, but it depends completely on practice sessions, sprint quality, and that sort of thing. Just look at their individual projections. Yeah, I suppose you could do. F1 Fantasy Tool was odd in the way that it's projecting Ricardo more than has even some of the other good drivers. Yeah, it's a bit strange, isn't it? What's actually predicting? Can we sort it by this column? Oh, that's the money column. No, is that the money column? That's so confused. Sorted by points. Yeah, Joe is actually predicted the lowest number of points, and then you got like the Williams actually like quite a lot higher, a lot higher. I am reading this right? You can see that on the screen. Drivers. So Verstappen's predicted an extra sort of 15-ish points, so I guess taking the -10 to 2 times him, it just cancels out that -10 to bring him in. It's interesting, yeah. Why is, and the hazards are really low. It's kind of odd. I don't know exactly how they work it out. I could probably click on some things here to find out exactly how they do it. Whatever, but yeah, it's kind of a bit odd that likes of Guan Yu Zhou are quite so low down. I don't know. I also feel like this is probably not a good way to look at it, but like maybe like if I stick with the same team, I'm like, actually no, I'm not even going to go there. It's just a bad way to look at things. I'm not even going to say it. All right, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess if the Sauber drivers get overtaken, that's a good point from Keith, because of the position that the Saubers find themselves in. What are they, like P9, P10? They're certainly susceptible to losing positions in the sprint, whereas the Williams are, I guess, in a good position to gain positions. Sargent at the back and Albon not far off. Maybe in the sprint at least, Sargent and Albon are in quite safe positions, and doubling up on them is fine. If Sargent's just at the back, if anyone else DNFs, he just automatically gains a point or two, and hope he doesn't just randomly crash off. It'd be great. Yeah, I'm not sure. What's the best budget build according to this mod? I can sort of sort it by budget building if you want. Is that right? Is that how? Is that, have I clicked on that right? Apparently this is the best budget building to plus 2.52, but it looks like a terrible team. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's because it's trying to capitalize on all the C tier drivers basically. Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't be going for a team like this, and a team for that, just an extra $500,000 but the predicted points are like 60 less than everyone else, so it's a bit rubbish. What else we got? Can't afford the meta. So there's a lot of people that can't afford the meta, and by the meta I mean Verstappen with some trash. Um, the question then becomes, do you build money or limitless? It's like, if you want to go limitless, do it, and you can build budget whilst having the limitless points, which is fantastic. But that's only if you think limitless is actually the optimal play. I wouldn't use it just to kind of cover off trying to build budget. If you can't afford the Verstappen build, then imagine I couldn't afford it, then I would be relatively happy just to stick it out with this team. And that also makes me think, like, why don't I just stick with this team then? If I'm happy to kind of stick with this team, if I couldn't afford the Verstappen build, then why not just stick with this anyway? Hope to gain some money. Maybe I miss out on 10, 20 points, but even if I don't, best case scenario is that actually this team equals or even betters the Verstappen build, particularly with the DNF factor of Sargent, Bottas, etc. But that said, there's still a DNF factor of every single driver that enters the race. So maybe I'm overplaying the Sargent DNF fear. I don't know. Maybe I've got a bit of too much fear of the Sargent DNF, but I don't know. Okay. Oh, Glenn's just popped in. Hey, wasn't expecting this, so played it on 2 times. Just caught up. You sound funny, by the way. I'd recommend it. Okay, thanks, Glenn. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to ask me, because I think I had kind of targeted kind of the hour mark to kind of wrap this up. If people want to ask me the last sort of few questions, and then I can go through and then kind of wrap it up at that point, and then go off and I'll go off into a quiet, dark corner somewhere in my house and just like finalize my team before going to bed, I guess. But yeah, to kind of summarize, I guess, where I'm at the moment, it is sticking with what's on screen at the moment, or taking the -10 and going with the Verstappen build. The simulations are telling me I should go with the -10 and Verstappen. My budget building potential part of my brain is telling me just to stay what I'm doing. There's good points potential in this current team as well as budget potential. Whereas if I go with the Verstappen build, I'm just completely, unless I get very lucky in that build, I'm basically neglecting my budget entirely. But it's a sprint weekend. We want to maximise the points to the full, and Verstappen's the most likely to get those points. But the McLarens and the Ferraris look really strong, and in the race simulations from F1, they're actually like very close to. In fact, if we pop over to the F1 website, can we find, where is it? Is this bit? Yeah, look at the simulation analysis from F1. Like McLaren, really, really fine for pole according to this. McLaren are not as bad as they thought. Yep, that's the kind of headline thing, and that's the headline thing that's kind of stopping me from going limitless. Yeah, qualifying pace, just a 10th off the McLarens. Similar sort of pace to the Ferraris. And then race pace, again, only about a 10th or so off both McLaren and Ferrari. So I don't know, is going all in on Verstappen when it's that close, and when he's starting further back, actually no. I mean, with only like a 10th deficit per lap on a sprint race, and Verstappen starting a few places back, we could definitely see potential first win in F1 for Lando Norris come the morning. I don't know. Right, let's have a quick look at the kind of final questions here. Choice between Zhou and Albon, who would I choose? I feel that Sauber doesn't have the pace and the pit stops, but Albon has nothing to lose. Yeah, it's a tough one because Zhou, home race, potential there for driver of the day potential. I think it's not that likely. But I think in general, the Saubers have like reliability issues in terms of pit stops. I keep banging on about the gearbox as well, but I know last season as well, my memory of Alfa Romeo as they were then, quite regularly, like Bottas getting the raw end of the deal, just randomly getting wheeled into the pits like halfway through a race, and it's just like the commentators don't even like bat an eyelid. Basically, it's just Alfa Romeo back in the garage because it's another reliability issue. It's like they're not going to have just ironed all those problems out. So maybe Sauber are just like slightly less reliable. What's this? Andreas Shallow. Please read my previous question. What was your previous question? How do I find that? See if I can scroll up and find it. here. There we go. I have Red Bull, Ferrari, Perez, Albon, Stroll, Tsunoda, Sargent. It's a very similar team to me. Thinking of switching Sargent with Bottas. Yeah, I like that. Saving one transfer for the next race. I can afford Verstappen build with Hulkenberg, but I don't want to waste 10 points for that. Yeah, again, it's a very similar position to me. And a similar position to how I was last week. I could afford the Verstappen build with Hulkenberg for -10. And I didn't go for it. And I think it was still kind of the right decision, but I still got burned by it. And you're in the same sort of boat this week. So again, it's like very, very knife-edge decision. Do you go for that? But yeah, I do kind of like saving that one transfer. Saving one transfer. Yeah, I also kind of like just kind of sticking with the team that I had as well. You know, the Perez, Albon, Stroll. Just get rid of Sargent, bring in Bottas, roll that transfer, have 3 going into Miami, and sitting pretty. What else we got? You don't often get a chance to pick some top drivers who have not qualified on pole. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. What else we got? No, I've already answered that question. You don't answer my question. First cut. I'm sorry. I'll get there now. I have Leclerc, Yuki, Magnussen, Nico, Albon, Ferrari, and Red Bull. But wondering if I should move to Max. I have 3 transfers. So I'm guessing you'd be left with the budget options of Sauber and Williams with that sort of build, I guess. 3 free transfers of Leclerc, Yuki, Magnussen, Nico, Hulkenberg, Albon, Ferrari. Yeah, I mean, again, these questions are very similar to what I'm already considering, so it's very tough to answer them because I'm still trying to debate exactly the same thing in my own head for my own team. And yeah, I haven't made that decision yet. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna close the stream in a minute and make that decision myself, and then I'll probably put it on my community page. If you go to my YouTube channel, go to my community tab, you'll find my team on there before I go to bed probably. Anyone else tracking the Rita simulation figures? They don't seem that great an indicator to me. That's a good point actually. I haven't really taken the time to look back at how accurate they are. It might be worth starting to do that, Glenn. Maybe you can do that for me. Yeah, if you could do that for me, it'd be great. Keep me updated. No, I should actually try and look at that myself a bit more closely because I think that's a very valid point. Like, how trustworthy are these simulations? Because we're putting a lot of faith in them. Like, we look at these. If I can bring them up on the screen, we look at these simulations. Where are we? Every week, and we put in quite a lot of faith in them, saying, "Oh, no, the simulations tell me put Verstappen in at the -10, it'll be fine," sort of thing. But actually, how accurate is this? How accurately are we scoring this? That's an interesting point. Right, we're getting there. Final few questions. Use no negative. Would you use no negative? Again, I've already touched on no negative, and I think if I would only personally use no negative if I went with this kind of all-in budget build at the moment. Otherwise, I think I'd probably hold off on the no negative. It's not that much of a dangerous track. There are a few narrow bits through the first and second sector, but I think overall, without the rain factor, it's not that dangerous a track. So I'd probably hold off on it personally. Where are we? Team lock deadline is in 18 hours. I don't think so. It says on mine 6 hours and 10 minutes. Are you considering no negative? Christian Naku, I am not considering no negative because I used it last week. Oh, not last week, the week before. If we go back to see, you can see here, Australia, no negative was used, which saved me a grand total of 20 points from Verstappen DNF. So, no, I am not considering it because I've already used it. Has anyone told you look like George Russell? I mean, I guess very, very, very slightly, maybe. Don't know. What's Fantasy Tool saying is you top points, mine's 250-ish with wildcard. I'm not sure what you mean, actually. Is there a toggle to turn on for sprint race points? What, on F1 Fancy Tools? Not sure there is, to be honest. Don't think there is. No, not that I'm aware of. I'm still, F1 Fantasy Tools is a great website, but I do sometimes struggle to actually navigate it sometimes as to where everything is. Thoughts on Sauber and Williams as constructors as a differential? Not sure if joking, Alex Kajalski. Not sure if joking. Right. Okay, so if you had that no negative to use, would you go for the Verstappen build? Again, the reason I wouldn't go for the Verstappen build mainly is because A, I'm stuck with Sargent kind of longer term, and B, it's not going to build my budget very much unless I get lucky. That's the main reason why I'm not going Verstappen build. Just, I can afford Verstappen build by 0.4. So a lot of people will be thinking like, stop thinking about it, just get the Verstappen build. But because it doesn't grow my budget in an average case scenario, and I want to be able to avoid the likes of Sargent and get in someone like a Haas driver or something like I could have done last week, but I missed the boat on that. Yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm very, very torn about it, to be honest. But in terms of using no negative, yeah, I don't know. I might use it just to make myself feel better, but again, I don't know if that's an optimal use of the no negative. Right, Rita has 918 fancy points and 108 million budget. Yep, he's doing all right for himself then. What would make it easier for you to decide? What are you referring to now? What, using the no negative? I'd reserve the no negative. I generally use, the last 2 seasons I've used my no negative in Australia because I just have this kind of innate feeling of DNF potential on like fast street circuits, basically, particularly circuits that have high DNF history. If the weather's bad as well, if you happen to have a bunch of these kind of more riskier drivers in your team, people that have higher DNF percentages in terms of their like DNF percentage across their career, there are lots of reasons why you'd kind of want to go no negative. And for me, China is ticking a couple of those boxes, but it's not like full red flag, red alarm, bleep in going use a no negative. It's a clear thing to use. I'd say if you use no negative in China, it's fine. I think it's a good option, but there's potentially better options down the line. It's kind of my final thoughts on the no negative. So yeah, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up there. Like I say, I will just finalize my very kind of summarize where I'm at again, because I kind of done it already a few minutes ago maybe, but this is my current team. I'm deciding between just keeping this exact team, no changes whatsoever, just burn one of my transfers effectively, because there's no one I actually really want to change it to, because I only have 0.2 in the bank. There's not much I can do about it. Switching from Zhou to Bottas or an Albon to a Sargent or whatever, that's just like pointless transfer. Basically, I'd rather have Zhou and Albon personally. So yeah, I'm basically deciding, do I keep this? Do I go with the Verstappen build with the -10 and go in with the double Sauber, double Williams? And that's what I'm going to decide probably before I go to bed. Unless, if I decide I'm to be a bit crazy and set my alarm for 3:45, make sure everything's like fine and everyone's actually starting the race and everything. Make sure I'm not going to start off with any like disqualification and random stuff going on. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of deciding to finalise on, do I stick with what's on the screen, or do I go with the Verstappen build? Do I want the instant Verstappen points in the sprint? Do I want to still get reasonable points with the Perez build and hopefully better budget gain? Like I say, it's a tough decision. I don't think there's any real right or wrong decision. I think both decisions will be fine. It's just I need to be at peace with my own decision. So if you're in the same boat as me, a lot of people will be in the same boat as me. I've had lots of questions. I've got the same team as you, except I've got Leclerc instead of Perez, for example. Just whatever you decide, just make sure that you're happy with your own decision that you decide on. Make sure that whatever you decide, when you come out of the other end, once you've gone past the deadline, make sure that you are not going to have regrets. And you can't change anything past the deadline, apart from final fix. But that's once a year you can do that. So yeah, don't beat yourself up if it goes wrong. Just be happy with the decision that you make. Basically, are you going to try and build budget, risk a little bit and build budget, or just ignore budget, just go for those Verstappen points in the sprint. That's kind of the decision making a lot of us are making, and I will decide that shortly. Like I say, I'll post it on my community tab either before I go to bed, or if I'm feeling crazy, I'll wake up at like 3:45. Don't know. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up what I'm thinking. So thanks very much for joining me on this kind of very impromptu lastminute.com stream. But I will wrap it up there. Wish you all the best of luck. Deadline's in just over 6 hours now. So yeah, don't, if you're going to go to sleep, make sure you decide on your team before you go to sleep, or set those alarms. So yeah, I'll see you next week, I guess, at some point for some Miami build up. For another sprint race. So yeah, good luck this weekend with whatever you decide on. Thank you very much for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I expect most of you subscribe at this point, to be honest, especially those of you chatting. So yeah, thanks very much. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you again soon. Have a good night, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Don't know. Thanks very much, and bye for now.